Prudentialist said he would be slightly late. He's going to be on Matt Erickson time.
I was about to say, you beat me to it.
Yes. So
on my time too. I'm classically late, but I do it on purpose. So,
what time is it there?
It's a.m. It's Monday morning at 9:27 a.m.
Okay.
The weather is fair, slightly cloudy.
Well, it's cold
later in the afternoon,
isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just preparing for my second career as a AM spot junkie. Just like.
All right. Can I ask you how my Sunday night was?
Uneventful.
Do we don't experience anything crazy? It's already happened for you.
I don't know, man. I wake up to weirdness a lot of times. Oftentimes in production of the show, right before I start streaming, I'm like, oh, well, now there's like 5 news stories that I have to talk about because these are much more interesting than I was planning on. But
well, this
Prudentialist.
Now I know this is a special event. There he is.
And there's a lot of plaid. There's a lot of plaid on this stream now.
There sure is.
Yeah. We did not plan this, folks.
Prudentialist, good to actually see you, and then for you to have you here too.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. It was convenient. I just got back from dinner, so it all worked out.
Excellent. Let me just double check, as you two probably know, but everyone watching, if you see this, probably knows that I don't do live streams very often. So, Denise, Daniel, I'll be the guy that Prude sent. Can you guys see us, hear us? Well, Emmanuel, all these people.
Oh, we're live. Okay, check.
Yeah.
1, 2, 1.
Well, I noticed. Well, it says you're
are.
live, so I mean, you'll be able to find out real quick as the comments pour in.
As they roll in.
Yeah. I was wondering if you had started or not.
Heck yeah. Okay. Random username. Thank you, Random, for the. I already got a $5. Is that called super chat? See, I don't do these. Jason Allen, good job up. Thanks for this. All right, we are live, folks. How cool!
So the boomer optimism and energy in this room has just gone up by a million%.
It's outstanding.
Good. Wait a second.
We're actually just going to have Buck try to change the time on a VHS.
You guys ever see a show called Impractical Jokers?
Yeah.
I was watching it yesterday at work, and there's one of the guys' punishment was to sit in an ice bath while he explained to one of the other guys' boomer mom how to hook up a VCR. And then there was another thing he had to do, but while he was in the ice bath. So he's like, hurry up, get the yellow cord in there. Come on, And so, by the way, I am not that boomer, guys. Speaking of boomers, I watched a debate the other night between a couple of them, or one of them showed up. Yeah, it was a master debate. So I rarely get to talk about this sort of the moment political stuff on my show, but this was so. I just want to talk about it. It was mind blowing. I haven't seen anything like it. I am still political. I always watch debates. The last one I remember getting super excited about was when Tulsi Gabbard took down Kamala Harris in that VP debate. I think that was 2016, possibly.
That was the 2020 Democratic primary.
Was that 2020? Okay.
Yeah.
Took her down so hard, Kamala became the VP. Whoa, jeez.
I know. Well, that kind of leads us into some of the stuff we're talking about because she was the least popular candidate of that Democratic field. Even they didn't love Tulsi in the way that they don't love RFK, I suppose. But I mean, Kamala did worse than her. And so now it's very possible, or we're going to talk about this. Is it possible that Kamala ends up as the nominee? But before we get into any of that, Prudentialist, give the people, they all should know who you are. But just in case, plug your stuff, and then we'll have Jason plug his.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for having me on, as always, with these shorter shows and live streams. I'm the Prudentialist, also known as Matthew. I host the Digital Archipelago with my good friend Gio Panicetti. I cover literature, politics, cultures, mainly, of course, the Christian religion. and just sort of on the nose political issues of the day. And I'm also known as a fisherman to some, so it's always a good time to be on these shows. You can find me at theprudentialist.substack.com. Just look for the lovely amphibian.
Got it. Jason Mirunchuk. How's that?
Oh, you got it. See, practice
Getting
makes
it.
perfect. Hi, I'm Jason Mirunchuk from 2-Bit Podcast. It's the name of the channel. We got 2 shows going on weekly. One is At the End of the Day, which is more of a dialogue show, and the other is Meet the Based, which is a nice little panel show we do. And Friend or Fed as well, which has been on a little bit of hiatus, but looking to get some of those back on the tubes at some point. And of course, follow me at X at 2-Bit Podcast for all my sporadic Spurgy posts.
Well done. Well, thank you guys both. So I we'll start. Jason, I know things are different time-wise. I don't know if you saw it live, but
yeah, I if you check it out, I think it's on my membership portal on YouTube. I did a live reaction to Alex Jones doing a live reaction to the debates, which is honestly the only way you should actually watch it, because every time Biden was on the screen, you just had Alex Jones yelling out, "Pedo, you shower with your daughter." It was brilliant. What struck me was the optics of it. Even before Biden was talking, just the visual of those 2 men. Biden looked dead.
I agreed. I noticed that too, right off the bat.
Yeah, 3 emotions. Are one of my favorite was the Scooby one, where it's like Trump would say something, and you see Biden go like a confused Labrador, looking up. Like it was bad, man. And then of course the mumbling and all the rest of it. Here's a question I have for the group and for the chat: do you feel like you're being gaslit now? Like who's gaslighting? Who's gaslighting the gaslighters? Because I feel you're seeing all this liberal media react to the Biden performance. You're like, we've been saying this for 4 years. Where the have you been? Like, have you been in this much denial? Is this a gas? Like, I'm starting to feel crazy. It's very 2020 vibes all of a sudden, where I'm in the middle of things going, wait, I can't be the only. What? You're just cottoning on to this now? What do you mean? Biden's out of it. He was out of it in 2020. He can't walk up and down stairs. What are you talking about? It's been pretty stunning, the reactions to it, but I don't know. We'll see how things play out.
Prudentialist, your thoughts when you watch? I assume you watched it live, but talk about any of that.
Yeah, I watched it live also vicariously through somebody else. I watched it with Patrick Casey's stream with Nightmare Vision, which I felt just to listen to the host of Night Owls give me their takes made it all the more worthwhile to listen to. But I agree with Jason a lot. Like the optics of it going in, I think everyone felt like this was going to be a trap laid for Trump. I mean, honestly, because it was, we're going to mute mics. There's no audience. There's no opportunity for Trump to act like Trump. And then to him be very well disciplined, on message. Everything went back to illegal immigration, which was fantastic. But I mean, as soon as Biden went on there and you heard his like muffle hello, like he's waving to an imaginary audience, it was as soon as he opened its mouth, I thought, well, this is game over. Like it was entertaining to watch. Although, to listen to the CNN panel right afterwards, where you're getting Van Jones on the verge of tears saying we need to get rid of this guy, that opportunity passed months ago. Like the primary was your option. And we even saw this in 2020 when you had, who was it? Jason Swalwell from California basically say, it's time for the younger generation to take the reins.
Eric Swalwell, Eric
Swalwell. Yeah, the guy who slept with a Chinese spy. And you would think that would have been the time for anyone to sort of get alarm bells, because there's articles now today, I think is sort of this post presser, where they're admitting that he sundowns at 4:00. And so what world have you guys been living in? Have you been high off of your own supply? Yes. Like Jason, there's gaslighting who at this point? Because outside of I think Ohio, with how the convention is supposed to go, it's a little too late, and it would be disastrous, I think, in terms of money, logistics, political capital to change a candidate this far into the race. And everyone's kind of seen who's already spoken. The Democratic National Committee spokesperson said that we're sticking with Biden. The third term of Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama himself says, I'm still with Joe Biden. He made reference to his first debate with Mitt Romney in 2012 about how shitty it was.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was good to see a different kind of Trump, a disciplined, on message guy. But for us, I mean, it felt like I was getting a touch of that old black tar heroin of 2016, where it's really entertaining to watch liberals cry on TV. But I also know we're in uncharted waters.
Yeah, and yeah, there's a lot. I'm thinking about a lot of the stuff, the reactions I had to it. The first you both mentioned just initially seeing him, and immediately it reminded me of, and I know this has been discussed now, but I really remember this as a kid in high school learning about the Nixon and Kennedy debate, and Nixon just looked pasty, sweaty, and bad. And that's the first I was like, well, he looks like a skeleton. He's pasty. He's waving. Immediately, I said the same thing. Well, there's no one in the audience, and he's waving. The whole thing was strange. I think to what you said, the Prudentialist, excuse me, Matt, Prudentialist, about the rules, and I thought the same thing. They're trying to hurt Trump doing this. It kind of helped him because I think having the mic silenced for most of the time, I noticed they turned it up when the golf debate happened. But I think having Trump think, well, I can't just talk because my mic's off now, I think that kind of helped him. Unless I don't know if he thought of this beforehand, I'm just going to play it cool. I'm not going to be a jerk, because he could have trounced on him almost every time. And he kind of played it cool. And there's like a look of concern, I think genuine concern, a few times where he'd look over and kind of furl his eyebrows like, what, I think I would have, as someone who can't do this or wouldn't do that, just go, guys, what are we doing? Like, look, this is ridiculous. Are we going to finish this or continue this? This seems odd and strange, and kind of end it. But maybe it turns out just being Mr. Cool Trump kind of helped him in the end. What are y'all's thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it normalized him. Here's the thing, right? Is that in 2016, if we're going to go with the narrative, Trump was the opposition vote, was the middle America, silent majority, et cetera, vote, the middle finger to the ruling class. So on. That was the standard narrative for a while. And then they did everything they could to push him to the margins to make it look like if you even said something kind about Trump. I experienced this where I'm a Canadian living in Australia. Like, I don't care really. I mean, other than like general policy that will reach my doorstep, but I got other concerns in my life other than who wins the presidency. But even mentioning something like, hey, I don't like how they're lying about Trump on etc., would get you branded as a Trump supporter. So they were marginalizing any kind of possible kind words you could possibly even say about the man for 4 years. And that did a good job. Now what's happened with putting him through the court system, which is obviously rigged. They're openly admitting it on Andrew Cuomo, and Bill Maher admitted it on freaking Bill Maher show. I mean, that's about as normie con as you're going to get, right? Or normie lib or shit lib or whatever show you want to get. So I think you're actually in a position where the Democrats might lose the black vote for Trump, like legit this time, because they've made him into a felon, into an innocent felon, which reads, and then you now have him on stage, and you've done all these things to protect Biden and maybe hurt Trump, and all you've done is made Trump look normal. So he looks more presidential and more normal for not being really vicious and crappy. They talked about the golf game, and I think Trump made one shot where he's like, I don't think this guy knows what he's talking about, more or less.
Yes. Well, it was because his statement was so garbled and nonsensical. We're all thinking it. And Trump just, if you're going to respond to it, he couldn't. He just said, I'm not sure what he just said. It still makes me laugh. It was my favorite moment of the debate because I was thinking the same thing, like, what? And Trump goes, I don't know what he just said, and I don't think he does either. And then went to his own stuff. But I'm trying to be a Christian and not laugh at someone's downfall. But the moment was funny, and I got caught up in it because I'm thinking, it's like I kept thinking this is Trump's best moment of relating to the average person, because we're all going, what? Like, I'm not sure what he just said. I don't know how you would respond to a quote unquote debate in this type of situation when your opponent is effectively on, high dose heroin or something and is just kind of slurring.
Yeah, I think one of the things to really consider here is that, Trump had an opportunity, like Jason said, to appear as the calm, sane, rational person. Something that was a really big departure that we saw in 2016 and 2020 was, of course, making him as this great, lather of aqua jet and orange kind of fascist, which obviously Trump is the furthest thing from a fascist. And yet, I think the most humanizing moment that they had with Donald Trump in the 2016 election was, of course, Jimmy Fallon going through his hair on national TV, because Jimmy Fallon tries to live like it's 2010 and the Great Awakening hasn't happened, or whatever you want to call it. Whereas now, this is a man who everyone kind of knows is under a rigged judiciary process, not just in New York, but in Georgia, and then, of course, with the federal cases. And you have a guy who's just like, everyone knows that the border's being overrun. Everyone knows that the United States doesn't have an industrial capacity to defend itself if it were to ever go in a peer-to-peer conflict, like either with China, Russia, or anyone else in the Middle East. And so it raises serious concerns that now America got to see on full stage that the guy who's in charge is just sort of confirming everyone's biases, that Biden isn't in charge. And we saw that as soon as the post-debate run happened, because Jill Biden, being a teacher, doing like, you answered every single question like she's talking to an elderly patient at an old folks home. And so you can't help but realize that whoever is actually pulling the strings, whether it's like post Woodrow Wilson's stroke and his wife is kind of running things behind the scenes, whether it's Jill Biden or a lot of the, Barack Obama infrastructure we saw inside the, civil service, there's a lot here that we're not getting to see. And it's a really nice moment for millions of Americans on TV to realize, oh, there is no Wizard of Oz. It is just a decrepit old man behind the curtain.
I mean, and this plays into, sorry, Buck.
No, please go ahead.
Off that for a second. When Reagan, remember second term Reagan, and, and it was revealed afterwards, after the Iran-Contra hearings, when they put Reagan they brought Reagan up to testify, and he couldn't. And they basically had to like softball the idea that actually for the last 2 years he's been checked out. And it's been run by other people, probably by George Bush. It's now being openly discussed. I think it was New York Times or Washington Post. I can't remember which headline, but basically saying that, people are now choosing to not to vote for Biden, but vote for the oligarchy behind him. And it's like, okay. I mean, that's an odd confession suddenly. Like, we Buck, you and I have been saying this on our show from an Orthodox perspective. This is the apocalypse. It's the revealing of all things hidden, and certainly now all things are being hidden. All things hidden are being revealed. This I've been calling it. This is a line from Pajot, but this is an inverted world where you can now the inversion is becoming more and more obvious to everyone. Where they've just taken the good, the beautiful, the true, and just done this to it. And so degeneracy, the lie, and basically evil are being exalted as values. Just off top side quest, but it's related, is that I just saw I don't recommend anyone looking for this.
I know. I already know what you're going to say. I agree.
Yeah, from San Francisco Pride. And there's like, I'll couch the language on this because it makes me want to puke. And my daughter's sitting next to me. So there's a guy sitting in a pool and having people urinate on him in public.
Among other things, yeah.
That's where we're at now in the West. So, and what you're saying, Peru, is true, is that now the lie has touched everyone's life. Now everyone's not 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from the lie. Now it's in your home. It's in your street. It's in your living room. It's present. And the more present it becomes, you can't lie to people about, hey, the economy's not so bad. It's like, I can't afford food, right? Or I have to make decisions about how, what I pay for this month. Oh, okay. Well, that's, you can't tell me how good the GDP goes up. Doesn't matter all of a sudden. If you have a family member who's been attacked or raped or assaulted or something like that by a culturally enriched person coming across the border, suddenly those things hit home in ways that that didn't before. And a Kasparian's little character arc where, she was all pro-immigration and pro-everything until she got assaulted on the street like last year. That starts happening. And people look around and they can't blame the Republicans in a purely blue state like California. So it's like suddenly the consequence these what I'm calling the consequence crisis builds up, hits everyone in the face, and then they have to start doing something about it. And now suddenly Trump becomes a viable option and the people behind him. So it's a bitter white pill, but it's a white pill.
Well, the white pill is I can't think of two images. One I don't want to think of anymore, but I unfortunately saw it on Twitter. But to represent the current state of the regime as it sits or stands or stands in a pool is Biden's performance, and then that image of what was going on in San Francisco. And it's just like, there it is, folks. Like, for people on our side, that's what you're scared of, that kind of thing. So I think it is a white pill in a sense. And to answer, I was going to ask something like this too. Sir James Arthur, what do y'all think of people like Brooklyn Dad doubling down for their support of Biden? I was going to phrase it like, you saw even the basic generalized mouthpieces of the regime, CNN, these type, Van Jones, even MSNBC, the New York Times going, wait, this isn't good. And then there's still this little sliver. It's like the remnant. Ron Paul talks about the remnant and references the biblical story that we were the remnant. Well, there's still like a remnant of idiocy where it's like even the blue pill base supports like, and there's still this weird remnant of people. I don't know, Brooklyn Dad's, I think I saw some thing where he was paid by the DNC recently or something, but there's still this weird remnant of you like, no, it was actually great. You should have seen him the next day. He was all full of vigor. And now I'm back into it. Just thoughts on, I mean, it's kind of basic, but it is weird to still see this when it's so the emperor has no clothes, but to 5% of the people he still does. Matt.
Yeah, I think one of the things to look at here is that they knew this 4 years ago. I think it was in the New Republic or the Atlantic. You can literally look up the headline where it was like, Joe Biden, stay alive. All that we need is your corporeal form to make it across the finish line.
Yes.
We already knew what was happening 4 years ago. We already saw this too, even earlier this year, where they had that presser about I think it was some inspector general or some special counsel saying that like Biden seems like a nice old man with a poor memory. And again, I think that all of this is reiterating things that you and all of us here take for granted in the chat, especially is that we know he's not in charge. Like the executive authority as we know it has been so radically defanged towards the administrative aspect of the executive branch that, Biden is the face of a party. He is the one in contact with the American people. So technically he does have a lot of leverage and leeway, but that's also taken care of by where everyone's trying to come up with their own crises like term. You've got your consequence crisis. I have one called the consultancy crisis, where you have all these consultants and middle managers and people who work in marketing and media management trying to carefully craft an image that Joe Biden is the safe grandpa to stick with as America continues this Obama-esque radical ethnic and political transformation. So we can't ever let, middle America or white America have its voice in the election. And I mean, 2016 was, I think, based on the reactions we saw immediately after November, was a realization that they didn't have their thumb on the scale as much as they thought they should have. Yeah. Because the rhetoric that happened right after he was elected was from Google, from big tech, from everyone, was basically they just took the phrase never again, but applied it to the election. Like Donald Trump, never again. None of that, none of these flukes can ever happen again. And so we're all getting to see the hidden things being revealed, but also at the same time, I think what we are witnessing now is the sweat is actually noticeable on the collar. The makeup and everything is now bleeding into the blue or white shirt, because now everyone gets to see a moment, just for a moment, a crack that things are, they don't have as much control as what they have anymore. And I mean, not to reduce it to sort of in a basic materialist lenses, but as you mentioned, Jason, if people can't afford food, people can't afford gas. And I'm witnessing that even in my state of Texas, that, more Guatemalans, Ethiopians, people from all over the world are getting flown in on my taxpayer dime to purposefully ethnically change the demographics of my own region. I'm at war And I'm witnessing happening it right now that maybe the generals don't have the best battle plan in case they don't succeed.
Well, there is none. There is no plan B. What's really stark and what started me down this sort of rabbit hole in sort of geopolitics was reading Klaus Schwab stuff. If you read the Fourth Industrial Revolution and Build Back Better, I think that's what it's called, and some of his other stuff, you start to see Project 2030, right, was the big thing. And that when you read Project 2030, you start to understand both what happened in 2020 and what's happening in Ukraine. Because part of what's happening in Ukraine was what the EU got convinced of doing was building a super city essentially from Brussels to Berlin. That's going to go cutting it right across the Netherlands. So what they did is they earmarked a lot of that farmland as protected areas for CO2 and whatever have you, and they're just going to repurpose that into like this. I think the idea was, I don't think it's one big giant city, but it was like interconnected areas so that you basically have this new Eurozone. And part of that plan was then to take over Ukraine, because Ukraine has the most fertile fields in all of Europe and some of the most fertile fields in all the world, and then move all your farming over to Ukraine. And then that's taken care of, right? You don't have to worry about your food sources being gone from the Netherlands, which was the food basket of Europe for the majority. Well, now you have the problem in Ukraine, and that's why they're freaking out and why they can't do a peace negotiation, and they are screwed. Because one, they've attached a money train to it. Two, this was part of a massive big plan that's now collapsing around them, and there is no plan B. Oh, and C, there was this whole idea about the fertilizer crisis, which is creeping up behind us. And part of that reason is that phosphates that are used for most industrial grade fertilizers are also used for EV batteries. Now, the difference is that you can use about 90% of a phosphate deposit for fertilizer. You can only use 10% for EV batteries. So they've decided that EV batteries are more important than fertilizers. Big problem with that is that's food. So I live in Australia, which is completely and 100% dependent on fertilizers, because for the most part, you're trying to build in sand. So you're facing a worldwide food shortage, the likes that we have never seen in the modern world outside of pockets of, say, the Soviet Union and other places, while they continue to push this EV car agenda, because that's where they have all their money and investments in. Like, if you track back all of these things, you find out that, again, a bitter white pill here is that we're dealing with massively corrupt people. And the bitter white pill about massively corrupt people is that they're capable of doing insanely evil acts, but at the base of it is avarice. The passion of avarice. They just are making money. Why? Because that's what they do. That's what they're addicted to. They don't have any other way of thinking. So to them, it's just make more money. Well, you already have billions and trillions. Make more. They can't think out of it. So now, as these consequences are hitting them home, all the plan structures collapsing around them, and it leads for a counter elite like Matt Erickson's been talking about with the PayPal mafia and others to come in and go, all right, that's it, enough. Eric Prince becoming now a leading intellectual, essentially a model for many young men, is staggering, because he's coming out and just talking truth. Putin, for Christ's sake, is his WMD is just saying the truth. He can just say, this is crazy, these people are nuts and stupid, and we're not going to deal with them. And suddenly everyone's flocking to him, because it's like, well, at least he's not lying. Sure, he might be evil, he might be all these other things, but he's telling the truth, and that's refreshing. Xi's doing the same thing. We're watching that collapse happen now. I personally believe that there will be a revitalization. I think that the counter elites are going to get in with Trump, and maybe this we can get into a VP conversation.
Yeah.
With you.
You're good at leading this where I wanted to go.
Well, I occasionally have my talents.
You tend to do this.
Yeah, I think the big tell will be who Trump's VP pick is, because I think now Trump's getting in. I think now their plausible deniability of getting 82 million votes for the Democrats is gone now. It doesn't matter who the hell they run. Put Big Mike in there, whoever, right? Like, find a way to get Obama to run again. I don't think they win it. It's that bad. So then the question is, okay, Trump's getting in. Who's his VP pick? And I think if it's JD Vance, then it's like, okay, game on. Like now we're kicking for gas, and we've put the pedal to the metal, and we're heading into a brand new American empire.
I think I guess this is the running debate I've had with all of that in the backdrop is, for instance, how much of this was planned, or how much of it has been like the Dutch boy putting his finger in the dike. Like, how many fingers does he have to like try and plug all these different holes in? For instance, in Ukraine, you have the two largest semiconductor grade neon manufacturers in there. I mean, they make up to like 40 to 50% of the world's semiconductor grade neon. And the war shut them down for the most part. And so now, well, how conveniently timed that the USA Chips Act comes in, trying to bring, semiconductor prefab plants back to the United States, which has been very slow due to our corporate culture, i.e. DEI and progressivism, alongside we just don't have the manpower or the human capital to do so. And then so it's like, well, that also has a huge issue with grain and shipping, because like you mentioned, it's one of the most arable lands in the world. And that's thankfully kind of been managed with these agreements with Russia to get grain out of the Black Sea. On top of that, you have an ongoing crisis about, well, America does need to remanufacture, because you look at the Chinese or you look at the Russians, or even how warfare has changed, that we're not talking about how easy it is to bleed and empire drive millions of dollars worth of technology when you can do it for 50,000 or less with these, RC controlled, these drone controlled boats or whatever, or missiles or drones, and doing so in the Red Sea. I mean, that's an impressive amount of way to disrupt a global economy. So, I mean, I wonder how much it's there, but you are seeing a fracture. And I think that I don't want to give credit to these two communists too much, but they wrote this essay called "The California Ideology" back in the 1990s. And it's discussing the very people that would constitute the PayPal mafia, is Matt Erickson likes to focus on so much, because their idea is, we want to be left alone. We like our laissez-faire capitalism. We like being able to invent, create, and do what we want, as Silicon Valley's been known to do so, but also we really need the government to protect us from outside foreign entanglements. And America's done this before. We saw this under the Biden administration with U.S. Steel, and I think Japan threatening to buy them out. And that was intervened on the state's behalf, which I would argue is a good thing. But I guess it raises the question now, like, one of the things that people ask, well, like, why Doug Burgum, right? Like, that's one of the names that gets floated out. And I mean, his background is McKinsey and Company, Great Plains Software in Fargo back in the 80s. He was working back with Microsoft and worked also in numerous investment firms, specifically with venture capital and technology and environmentals. And I mean, he's actually kind of well connected in the business world in that sense. And I don't think people are looking at his business aspect in comparison to, who he actually could be as VP with that kind of ties. I don't personally like him because on an electoral sense, North Dakota makes no bloody sense at all compared to, say, Ohio with JD Vance or anyone else that could potentially be important. But again, I think he's got to focus on the Midwest, because that's what hurt him, I think, the most in 2020, outside of the usual shenanigans, because you can't, as a Republican candidate, you can't afford to lose any more of the white vote than you already have. And it doesn't matter how much Trump tries to shore it up with African Americans or Hispanics, you still need the white vote to win, and he needs the Rust Belt.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys have out of the names that have been floated out there as possibilities for the VP pick, I heard Tho Bishop on Radio Rothbard kind of separate them into a couple of different categories. And I'm curious, obviously we have guys that we would prefer over what I would call like boring, normally conservatives. But I'll ask both of you, do you kind of separate them into like this camp good, this camp mediocre, whatever, this camp awful? And what would the names be?
The thing that we don't know at this position is what position the Trump another 4 years Trump will take in terms of. I'm a big believer that there is no real big conspiracies, there's often a series of reactions. So that can look like a conspiracy on the outside of it, or you take a 1,000-mile view from it. But I think as you get closer in on the particulars, there are people who have their desires and their own little angles and stuff like that. But like you said, Peru is like it's the Dutch boy with a lot of holes in the dam. And normally maybe there was only 2 before, and now there's a million. So it's I don't know how I don't know if there's a long-term structured plan with Trump or what the tenor of this 4 years are going to take. Why I've said JD Vance is I think JD Vance is one, he's a Peter Thiel guy, so he's going to be a direct representation of that group. So is Vivek for that matter. But the question really remains is like, is the VP pick going to be the guy who's going to continue the trend, so that setting up for another 8 years or more of a certain group, positioning people as their avatars, which we've seen in the past. So, that's why I'm thinking if it's going to be the PayPal mafia pushing behind Trump and that whole thing, I think JD Vance is the necessary pick. I haven't looked into a lot of the other possibilities. I know it won't be a woman. I doubt it will be Vivek because his electability in 2028. I don't think the West is there yet to. I don't think America's there yet to put a Brahmin or East Indian or in position. I might be wrong, but I don't get that sense. As for the other picks, I haven't really looked down the list too much. I think whoever it's going to be is, again, I don't know if we're looking at it in sort of the classic way of getting votes into the office is necessarily how to look at it. I think that's one dimension, but I think if there is a bigger plan at play here, then the VP will likely be the real representation of the group behind Trump. And so whoever that is, you kind of get an idea of who's backing who, that's my intuition about it.
Matt?
Yeah, I'm of a similar opinion that whoever is going to be the vice president is going to be sort of the manager behind the scenes of the executive branch. In the same way, I don't think Vivek is going to be vice president at all. I think he will be seriously considered, if not appointed to a cabinet level position. Or I really do not want him to be chief of staff because there's a great little short write-up about why you shouldn't hire Indians. And so, again, I don't want him filling that in there, although Vivek is the future of where like the Republican Party institution is going, because you had prior to Ronna McDaniel resigning, there was a race for the chairmanship of the RNC. And if I recall correctly, before I totally screw up her name, Harmeet Dillon was a woman that was running against her for the RNC chairmanship. She's the former vice chairwoman of the California Republican Party, and she's a GOP lawyer. And she was trying to, dethrone Ronna McDaniel from the position. That didn't succeed, obviously, but you had Vivek Ramaswamy on the debate stage in the 2024 Republican primary debate saying Ronna needs to resign. That the subcontinental aspect of the Anglosphere being filled with these guys, that is an inevitability somewhere down the line. I don't think America is ready for an Asian president anywhere further down the line. If there's one area, I guess, of bigotry that, outside of anti-white racism in the United States, it's just that I don't think America is ever going to vote for an Asian president in my lifetime. Could be wrong, but I just think that's the way it is. I think whoever gets in for vice president is going to have connections towards venture capital, specifically, the tech sector, and will probably need to be working with those people, because the one thing that Biden has done, which is just a continuation of Trump's policies, has been trying to get as much reshoring on the technical industrial level as humanly possible. Despite the wars in Ukraine and our ongoing aid to Israel, or trying to shore up our defenses in Taiwan and Japan and elsewhere, has been this desire to speed up the process to reshore semiconductor manufacturing, defense technologies, armament manufacturing, things that require an empire to survive, because as the old saying goes, war is the health of the state. And because of that, I think that whoever gets in as vice president, one, I think does have to be electable. That is sort of a requirement. I think that JD Vance probably wins that bet for me, just because he's there. The other candidate that I don't think either of us have mentioned yet was Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia. He's done a very good job basically managing as a red governor in a heavily blue state. Virginia's gone so far blue due to Nova and immigration. It's really depressing because that state's beautiful. But, those two guys especially have a future in a post-Trump GOP, and whoever the Trump camp picks needs to have that in consideration. And I mean, Youngkin is a particularly interesting character because he's got a lot of relations to, of course, not only just investment firms and venture capital, but that was the business world that he was from, and he's got a lot of international connections as well that makes him a rather savvy executive. And I think that people are kind of sleeping on him. That less we get what we want, and deportations start effective immediately January 21st, 2025. That navigating this fractional, multi-ethnic America, Youngkin has kind of balanced that very successfully when he first got elected, because you had the whole Loudoun County sexual abuse stuff where he got a lot of immigrant populations to vote for them, because the one thing that these immigrant voting blocks are good on is that they hate the transgender people, and they don't want to deal with that with their kids getting assaulted sexually in schools. So, I mean, there's a lot to take into consideration, but I think that you need to consider the future of whatever the GOP is going to be, connections to tech and manufacturing, and then whoever can be the future that can carry this sort of revitalization campaign after Trump is out of office in 2029.
It can't be Youngkin. He's got a multi-Slavic last name. I'm serious.
Okay.
I'm serious. Name me the last president who had more than one syllable in his last name in your lifetime. Go ahead.
Fair.
Yeah, I can't.
Got to be one syllable.
Weird.
Vance works.
Yes, it does. Yeah, and that would be fine with me. Before I get into this next little piece, I thank you guys for being here. There's 97 people. I don't do live streams, so I mean that seems like a nice amount. Someone go and retweet it or something, and let's like 4 more people will bust over the triple digits. That's kind of cool. I did want to talk about the VP stuff, and I think we've hit on that decently. Initially during the debate, I'm looking at it, I didn't have my political analysis glasses on, and I'm just like looking at it logically and realistically. And I'm like, well, Biden's not going to be the candidate. This is absurd. I'm a firefighter EMT by trade. So I'm looking like he's a patient I would have like, sir, no, you cannot go to work right now. Much less do what he's wanting to do. So I'm looking at it through that lens. And then I started listening to Matt's analysis, Charles Haywood and others, and Thor Bishop as well. And it's like, well, there is, Matt, you mentioned it. Ohio's the state that stands out as being different. There's under 40 days away to have someone picked to be on if you're going to be on the ballot in Ohio, which and everyone knows that's the state besides Florida and California that you have to be on, obviously. So I don't know that they have the options to not have Biden as their representative. Then today, take this for what it's worth, which to me is not a whole lot. I wasn't a Bill O'Reilly fan when he was on TV or on Fox, and I'm not particularly the one now when he's not, when he's got kind of a third-rate show going, and he says he's got the knowledge. Biden's not going to be the guy. There's sources inside the White House that he's, that somehow spoke with him, and they're just figuring out how they're going to break this news. So I guess it's kind of a generic question, but this was such an odd debate. You can only go so many places afterwards, but the most obvious one is Biden going to be the nominee in November? And I'll let you guys discuss.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to.
That's where I'm at now, by the way. I am at yes too.
Unless he dies.
Yeah, that's literally the only
which is an
way
option.
He's not on the ballot, is if he dies. That's all I see. And even then, I hate to speculate about people dying, but I mean,
right.
I think him dying may actually help whatever campaign is on the ticket. I mean, heaven forbid Kamala is the ongoing, incompetent insurance policy that keeps Biden in office. But I mean, the sympathy aspect of it may work. But I mean, this goes back to the revealing of the hidden things being revealed. Is that 2020 worked for Biden because you had the crisis of all that wonderful,
Yes.
Wuhan flu stuff or whatever you want to call it, alongside the total media blackout on him because everything was about COVID. That was it. That was what everything was focused on, was on Trump and how he's doing poor with the response. Here's the lockdown. CNN had like the death count toll, everything going on. And no one was caring that Biden, outside of us on Twitter, really, no one really cared that Biden was having these socially distanced events of like 20 to 50 people tops. And no one really cared that he had no charisma. He didn't look well. He was dying, basically, and he wasn't mentally there. You can't do that now when even in this media environment is disintermediated as it is, where we can podcast and we can talk about things, and the news is traveling through all sorts of different wavelengths. You still can't get anyone excited about Joe Biden. Like it's not a sexy, energetic campaign. And I know that's a very old-fashioned way of looking at it, but that stuff still very much applies to the American political system.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, right, that's not going to stop a morbidly obese black woman precinct captain from, counting the votes 3 or 4 times for the same person over and over again, because that's still how American elections work in this godforsaken place. But hey, as someone who was an elections judge for 4 years while he was in college and getting out of college, it's an ugly, nasty process, and people would be less romantic about democracy if they knew how it actually functioned.
Yes.
But
they're starting to see it a little bit, but yeah,
a little bit. And so for me, it's like, yeah, Biden is going to be on the ticket. Like that's just guaranteed. He has to be. It would be a disaster to change the candidate now. It'd be millions of dollars of trying to change everything for the logistics of it would be a nightmare. As for VP, who knows? I don't know. Like no one cares about Kamala Harris because they conveniently keep her in these sort of like girl events where she talks to other women. Like she's got mugs where she's all in her pantsuits in different colors that they sell as like a pride flag or whatever, an insult to God's Noahide covenant about not flooding the world again. But it does illustrate to me, at least, that I think they're just going to go with status quo ante. They don't care that Joe Biden is mentally non compos mentis. The corpse has to cross the finish line at all costs. But I think that you can't pull off what you did as effectively as what you did in 2020. I could be wrong about that. Who knows? We still have plenty of time before the election. We have 15 days before the Republican National Convention happens. And so a lot can happen from now and 2 weeks and some change and until November. But I think for us, Biden's the nominee, Trump is the nominee, and even if they try and get Trump stuck in court for the rest of the time, whoever his vice presidential nominee is going to be has to be a barnstormer. And I think Vance is going to end up being the answer to it because young, can travel, not under any legal trouble. I mean, despite the fact he married an Indian woman and has, half Indian kid, having a family is good for optics, and he can sell himself very well to American voters. And so I think that whoever he gets has to be a significantly younger man who can have the energy to rally and message while he's locked up or he's dealing with court stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think people have to let go of this pure blood thing for the time being. I'm not an ethno-nationalist. I've said this repeatedly, both as an Orthodox Christian and just as like someone who's dealing with in the reality of 2024 in the West. It's like, look, guys, that's just not going to happen right now. It's a crazy position to have, and I'm all for people trying. Go do your thing. I'm not telling you not to wish and dream and produce things if you want, but at the same time, it's like right now disqualifying Vance because he's. I'm not saying that this is what you're doing, Matthew. I'm just saying that I know as soon as someone says that, they're like, I can't vote for him because he's married to he's not all white. Okay, calm down. Like it's just stop. Right. So there's that aspect to it. I honestly think again with Vance, it's as you said, he's got energy. He can speak. He's wonderful on a podium. He's energizing. When he was outside of Trump's courthouse talking, everyone was doing all the possible VP guys were doing their rounds, and Vivek spoke, and of course Vance did. And Vance is Vance is really interesting to listen to. In some ways, he reminds me of 2008 Obama, when I heard him speak at an MLK event or something like that, and I was like, "Whoa, who's this guy? That guy can talk." Like long before the election, a year or two before the election, whatever that was. And Vance has got that persona to him. So, he's just my preferred pick. We'll see how that turns out.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with the Vivek strategy, though, seems to be working out too, where Vivek came out and said, no, we got to paint them in a corner. They have to run. We want to get them to a position where they have to run Biden, and they have to keep Harris. Because here's the thing: even if Biden were to bow out, because I know the scuttlebutt is like they're going to put Newsom in, they're going to put Big Mike in, whatever have you. They're going to have to jump Kamala Harris.
Correct. Yeah.
Then the media spin on that.
Good luck with that.
I'm here for it. I'm so here for it. Are you kidding me? Oh my goodness, that would be so delicious. Just to see her, like, she'd have to step down. Basically, the entire office of the president and VP would have to vacate for two new candidates. Would have to. There's no way for them to like skip the first POC, potential female president, legacy, all that stuff, and save any decorum or face without them just saying, "Yeah, we're going to put the creepy white guy from California in."
Yep.
Like, there's no. If they do it, it'd be like chocolate cake every day. Are you kidding me? I want them to do it. I just don't think they can. So
no.
Again, I keep going back to the boat. We'll see.
Yes,
we are in uncharted territory.
We are. I mean,
wacky, folks. I'm excited. Are you excited? I'm really excited.
As obvious as this performance should have been at that debate, I was sitting there. I could not believe what I was seeing. Again, we've all known this is, but I think we've seen them pump him up with stuff. State of the Union. I've heard Tucker Carlson say he personally knew someone that did the injections or whatever the thing was. So I thought, well, here we go with this, and it was just, I was just shocking. And so I shouldn't be shocked by anything. I've said that so many times the last 3 or 4 years, but there we are again, and I was. So there's no telling what moving forward is going to shock me. But skipping Kamala Harris and what that would do optically for them would be pretty shocking. Again, maybe I'm here for it. That'd be fun. We'll get our popcorn, and there's all sorts of live streaming we can do and have fun with this. But I suppose we have to go to this. We've all said it, that betting odds say it, that Trump is obviously going to win in November. And so from our perspective, whatever that may be, Orthodox perspective, our personal worldviews, whatever that may be, how would that look in your opinions?
That's the trouble of uncharted waters, is that you really don't know what that would look like. I mean, if Trump gets in, that's a whole other bag of rocks to sort of juggle around with. I think that the first thing that we should all do, of course, is to temper our expectations. I like the campaign rhetoric that I'm hearing. I also liked the campaign rhetoric in 2016, and I not to put this guy on blast for him not to defend himself, but I was recently at the Old Glory Club conference. I spoke there, and Mr. John Doyle spoke there, and he focused really heavily on the stakes of this election, that every year we lose 2.5 million primarily white, primarily Republican voting baby boomers. Like, this is kind of like one of your last elections for a majority white electorate to really have an impact. And, I felt bad being the stick in the mud, but I was like, I've been hurt before, with respects to Trump and whatnot. I do see him more disciplined, and I'm optimistic, especially with a lot of the other things behind the scenes with who his campaigners are, who his managers are, this Project 2025 stuff. I'm seeing former Trump aide and Project 2025 associate John McEntee, quote basically Devin Stack and Corey Mahler tweets about, like, you can't argue with boomers, you're arguing with the TV. Like, that's a huge sort of that's a huge white pill for me. Also, because he went viral with that TikTok about giving homeless people fake Hollywood money, which I was like, people don't know who that is, but like, that's actually kind of a big deal that he's just like chatting so nonchalantly about those things. I've said it before, and I've said it on the main on the timeline publicly. But if he wants to go forward with, say, deportation, that will actually be the event that triggers armed resistance in the United States. Because you look at, say, the United Kingdom or other parts in Europe with liberals that will literally get and interrupt deportation flights to interrupt them and stop them. They'll crowd around buses and things like that. They do that unarmed. We know in America that if there's a drag queen story hour in Red State, Idaho, there is some Socialist Rifle Association or some John Brown gun club that will show up and arm and defend that drag queen story hour. And so I think that that's potential for something bad to happen. But I think that what we will see is tempered expectations. But I think he's going to move forward on a lot of the things that he's talking about, because everyone knows that immigration is the one issue that absolutely matters. Even it's the most popular this subject has ever been in my lifetime. I'm 28 years old, and I mean, like, I've lived all over America. I've lived in border towns, and I'm like, you people got to go. And so it's like, it's interesting to see that subject like reach a fever pitch across a majority of America's demographics, and so not just whites. And so it's an electable issue. And you saw this in Texas in the 2020 election. The Rio Grande Valley in Texas is historically a very blue state, a blue part of the state. You compare their votes for Hillary Clinton and then how vastly they swung in the other direction for Donald Trump is a night and day difference. Not saying that I should, put all my eggs in that basket, but it does give you a chance to see that, like, you can put these nominally pro heartland American issues in terms that you can sell to the others, which I think Trump can do successfully. And I think whoever his VP pick will as well. And so I think that if Trump gets in, the Chevron, argument gone is great. The fact that a lot of his J6 stuff with the court has also been struck down. And basically he can campaign and say, like, listen, I gave you the Roe reversal. I'm now in a position to deconstruct the bureaucracy that you guys hate and make America accountable again, which is another great phrase that he can use. That's good for him. Because, I mean, we saw this with Nixon. We saw this with first term Trump. We even saw this with Reagan as well, is that guys who want to get stuff done were stopped by the bureaucracy, the courts, and by other factions on the right, primarily the neoconservatives. Neoconservatives are all Democrats now, most of them. I mean, there are still, of course, holdouts in the GOP mainstays, and the ghost of George W. Bush still haunts the Republican Party in Texas today, which is such a tragedy. But I think that even if Trump is not as this, he's not going to be the American Caesar or Sulla or whoever, but I think that Trump getting in office is miles better than what we have now, obviously. Even if he doesn't get all the way done what he has, there's good infrastructure, I think, that will be laid for the future. But as always, as we sing every Sunday, trust not in princes and the sons of men, in whom there is no salvation. So I can't say, like, he's the guy, let's do it. But he is miles better than what we have today.
I think Trump, a lot of my predictions and stuff that I talk on my show is all kind of coalescing into this moment. Part of his vengeful son, part of his the neo-trad stuff, and the other big one that I haven't talked a lot about, but is really becoming proving itself, is the Build a Caesar moment. This is sort of memetics, but geopolitical wise. My theory is that to get a Caesar or to get a great man, for example, there's a modeling that happens, that every great man has modeled himself after many other great men, and then you get sort of this avatar who comes out, who comprises all these great men into one being. I think you're seeing all over the place right now. You take Bukele, what's centered to this idea is that all a populist, let's say, leader has to do right now is solve one thing clandestinely, and then that will be modeled by other people. So Bukele solves the gang problem in El Salvador. That gets now modeled by Milei in Argentina, who's now openly said, I'm going to start doing that. Milei just showed how you can gut out a whole bunches of the government bureaucracy and do just fine financially. So now you have at least two models of two sort of populist positions. If Trump is part of this Build a Caesar kind of moment, where all he has to do is solve immigration, if he can solve immigration in some way that is positive and proved to work, now you have a way to deal with violent crime, way to deal with government bloat, and a way to deal with immigration. All you need is a few more populist leaders, let's say Hungary, let's say, Orban, whoever,
Yes.
to start clocking wins in one dimension.
Yeah.
Eventually, you're going to get a guy who goes, great, I can take all of this and combine it into a new way forward, which, again, I think that, Trump is not the Caesar. Who comes after Trump? Now we're getting into Caesar territory, if that's what you really want. Great man, whatever have you, right?
Yes. Which one can just get rid of AIPAC? We'll see. That's a challenge. I'm not sure anyone. JM, thank you for the $20. And Jason, sorry to interrupt.
No. I mean, that's kind of where it's at. Is that so? Mimetically, we don't have a model yet. So a model needs to come up, needs to almost be born, and that model needs different little models to build up into going into one clandestine model, and that will bring the new. What I believe, and Matthew Erickson's talked about this too, is that the American empire hasn't even started yet. This is sort of like we're still in the remnants of the British Empire, of some sort of transatlantic kind of hodgepodge homunculus kind of thing.
Yes.
That's been kept on life support post World War II. I think within our lifetime, if we're reading the tea leaves right, you actually will start to see the foundations or the beginnings of a true American empire, or let's say even a true Western empire, because of all the vassal states that will go along with it, which might be a cause for celebration and excitement, or woe and dismay, depending on what your flavor of world politics are. But something's got to rise up to meet BRICS now.
Right.
Because if not, BRICS takes over, and that's another possible horror show or wonderful thing, depending on how you view things. What you want out of this life. But yeah.
There's Matt. Do you have anything to say to that? Because I can go somewhere either way.
No, I think that Jason brings up a good point about trying to do the build the Caesar thing. I think that if Trump can, or his administration can, solve the immigration crisis in such a way that whoever succeeds him can model it and make it work. Because the thing about future geopolitical conflicts is that, and I don't know what Jason's take is on this, I'd love to hear it from him, there has to be a renewed focus. I mean, there's a lot of focus on China with good reason in terms of international trade and competition and our ongoing position in the South China Sea. All the attention, though, needs to be put down into Central and South America, not just because of the immigration crisis, not just because the Darien Gap needs to be closed, but because of the amount of Chinese investment in that area. A lot of America's rare earth mineral markets are kind of stymied by our own environmental regulations. We get a lot of that, one from Australia is a good example. I'm sure Jason knows that with respects to lithium. We do have some sanctions in place that kind of keep China out of that market. But I mean, when you look at the lithium triangle inside of South America with parts of Argentina, Chile, Argentina, and I think it's parts of Brazil as well, like that's a huge aspect that they've been investing in. There's been increasing use of these more leftist socialist governments that wish to get away from the Yankee imperialism, as they call it, with CELAC, the Community of Central American and Latin American States, that basically doesn't want to do the OAS, the FDR policy of like Pan-Americanism, which was probably one of the stronger foreign policy moves of FDR during the Second World War that doesn't get talked enough about. And so you have an ongoing crisis with the cartels, the Chinese, drugs, trafficking, immigration that this administration is totally allowing in. If you can stop the flow of money, for instance, on the charity question, both with, say, HIAS and Catholic Charities and the rest, that would be a great start. But the amount of Chinese investment in there is huge, not to mention the Russians playing in our backyard with respects to Cuba. And I think back to when John Kerry was Secretary of State, he had famously said that the Monroe Doctrine was an outdated doctrine. No, I think what people fail to consider when talking about like American imperialism or American empire is that the first time the Monroe Doctrine is openly debated inside the halls of the United States Congress is when James K. Polk invokes it, wanting to initiate a military intervention in the Yucatan Peninsula because white filibusters were being attacked and being, killed by the natives. And this is the time when he was like, well, the Monroe Doctrine says we should do this because white people are being killed that are Americans and we should do something about it. That's the first time it's debated in American history in the halls of Congress. And unfortunately, Monroe dies before we kind of get authorial intent as to what he wanted out of it. But I think that you have to have this renewed focus on Central and South America, because there is a coalition of leftist states that are coasting up China. There's a lot of markets that are there. I mean, I remember correctly, and Chad can correct me if I'm wrong, because of Chinese money and of course the vaccine diplomacy that happened in 2020, the nation of Uruguay changed its position on the recognition of Taiwan as an independent state to now being a Chinese, part of the Chinese territory, because of that money. Like, they had flipped their position on Taiwan overnight, essentially. And there's a lot of infrastructure going on in there. There's intelligence sharing. You have the cartels. That's a big part of the great game that has to be played. I think that what we've witnessed with this sort of American empire, or whatever you want to call it today, has been the conclusion of America's long-running sort of Cold War of empire with the United States and Great Britain. That great game has been played. Unfortunately, the consequences we can see in Europe today, whether depending on your position on Europe and how pro-rah-rah you are of this current iteration of empire. But I think something to consider for the future is that unless this administration, Biden's been doing parts of it, but I mean, Trump and whoever succeeds him, unless you can successfully restabilize the American polity. I mean, I think that there's a really good Substack from, Mystery Grove of all people, who was talking about the intense psychic damage that people have undergone, where half the country doesn't think the other half of the country has a right to exist. We're fighting these two competing narratives over culture, identity, and polity, where people still cite the Constitution like it's this, instructions on the box that say, here's how government works. To some extent it does, because our legal system is still based around it. But I mean, we know how anarcho-tyranny works. Unless you can restabilize and take the yoke out of the hands of your enemies, then that's a huge problem going forward. And I think that Jason has a very good point that whatever the future may hold for quote unquote big D democracy in the United States, geopolitically, strategically, and even internally, unless you can restabilize and, effectively tell these lefties and these, terrorist groups, like, hey, cut it out. That's the way to go. And until then, I think that that'll be the struggle going forward for whoever succeeds Trump.
My answer to all that, because since you asked for my opinion, is I'm going to kick it over to the real Matt Erickson, to discuss something that he found out when he was doing the digs on the PayPal mafia, which is Peter Thiel and co. Doing things like Prospera and all these little these are almost startup cities that are all over South America and all over Africa. So the interesting thing that's happening, and this feeds into Eric Prince as well, because if you listen to what Eric Prince has been saying on multiple podcasts, Eric Prince is basically almost a counterfactual to Robert McNamara. In terms of, he's leaning off some of the McNamara's ideas, which is the best way to wage war is wage a financial war, and not just through the economy, but you have to think of all your expenditures in war have to actually pay off. So he said, one of Eric's comments about the current state of the military in the West is that they're just wasting money. So they can't, even if you win, you lose, because you've taken this territory, but you've bankrupted yourself by doing so. Where he's like, look, I've done successful operations because I weighed the cost of every single bullet, of every single bomb we dropped, of every single ammunition was accounted for. So suddenly you're making smarter tactical decisions based on the cost. This is going to the military operation is going to cost you. So that's all happening. What the cure for things like BRICS and the multinationals, I think, will be through private, smaller, almost guerrilla warfare, and that's what the tech bros and what the PayPal mafia, or whatever you want to call them, that's what they're that's what they're really engaging in. When you think about it in those contexts, Bukele starts making a whole lot of sense. Bukele cleans up the gang problem to allow El Salvador to become an investment area. What for? Mostly Bitcoin. So now You have Prosper in Honduras, making a tech smart city that's very fit for investment and for tech people to settle in. You get El Salvador doing very similar things. I think Argentina is doing this exact same thing. So to your point, yes, South and Central America, vitally important for Americas, and for, let's say, the Western civilization or the regime or whatever you want to call it in general. Australia could fall to China like tomorrow. It's that easy. They're bought out. Look at what Dan Andrews was doing in Victoria. Just Google that thing and find out who's paying Dan. Right? I think to say that half the politicians in this country are bought out by China would be conservative.
In Australia?
Well, not to mention the open
Australia.
secret in Canada as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. So the way to break that is, I don't think you break it by Western hegemony kind of tactics or standard global politics tactics. I think you fight a guerrilla war, and I think you fight a guerrilla war on multiple fronts. The thing that's missing, and this is goes into something I've been saying for a while, is that you don't live in a civilization anymore. And one of the biggest tells you don't live in a civilization anymore is we're lacking this regio, which I compose as a region, religion, and ruler. You need those three things combined, and they need to be strong to bind people together, to give them a purpose and a meaning. So in terms of so you have Australia producing all this lithium and all this stuff. Great. What are you doing with it? Oh, you're just making more money, GDP go up. That has to end. The idea that we're getting all this material and we're producing something with it, and we're building things with it so that we can show the world, hey, this is what we do. Western civilization are builders. We build beautiful, crazy things. Why? Because we're builders, motherfucker. That's what we do, right? And we do, and it should be almost irrational outside of it, but internally it makes everyone go, hoorah, yeah, that's what we are, right? You need that, and if there's going to be a revitalization or any of those things, that's what has to start happening. It's not just collecting these resources and just having them in your belt to go do global trade, global homo kind of stuff. It's actually getting this stuff and then producing big, beautiful, wondrous, stupid, silly things, and making everyone really proud to be part of this big, silly, stupid thing. That's the cornerstone of civilization.
The most beautiful.
Right.
Matt Erickson, come on in.
What's going on, guys? Can you hear me okay?
Well, you've certainly made this awkward with your name, but I welcome you. I always welcome your thoughts and your presence. Anything we've been talking about that you want to chime in on? I saw Mornings with Matt after the debates, but if you want, you can. I just had a question after the debates. What was that? It's just what kept circling around in my head. It was just astonishing. But your thoughts on any of this or the debates or whatever you'd like.
One thought that just came to mind recently, and I can't remember who said this. It might have been Josh Ham, who's been sending me some good stuff in the DMs. He pointed out when Tucker was down in Australia, he sent me a clip, and Tucker was talking about what democracy is, what it means to be an American, and in his view, and of course, he has this very he has that naive boomer idealism. He's a real true believer in it, but he had an interesting way of framing it. He described being a citizen of America as being like a shareholder in the company.
I saw that, yeah,
of America.
It sounded like someone else we know.
Right. Someone else who their social circles obviously overlap pretty significantly.
Right.
So I think this ties in with the kind of the general move you guys are talking about and what we're seeing generally, which actually really, it makes sense that over a period of time, you would have, like, as we have these advances in efficiency, technological advances in efficiency, it's just a matter of time before the more efficient processes wean out the less efficient ones. And it seems like one of these frontiers is the private cities, like Jason is talking about. And there's kind of what I see as like a political Aikido move that can be done, at least theoretically, and it seems like there's elements of this being done, where You have the 15-minute city that's being constructed. I think the World Economic Forum, Davos people, they have their own motivations in constructing those sorts of things. But that means that they're kind of, how would I say this? In one sense, they're kind of laying down, or they're clearing the ground for these types of constructions that can be done by our guys, by people who are actually trying to create regions that are run competently, and actually, like, I mean, if you can set up just a single city, a single private city that runs effectively, that's built as a civilization, like on a civilizational model, then it becomes the mimetic model for even more of that. And so you see with Bukele, what I said when I saw his interview with Tucker was, the more people see this, the more they're going to demand it. It's created a new standard for a civic leader. And it's not really nationalism. It's not really, and it's not really monarchy. It's sort of its own new thing, which squares with the historical cycles of history. That we're due for an update in political technology, and it seems like we're getting that. And we're going to get the bad sides of it, and we're going to get the good sides of it, as has always happened. But I think, regardless of what the intent was of the various different coalition members of the regime with that debate, what really was revealed is the machinations behind the scenes. It becomes evident, and it's becoming evident to more and more people, that this is a bunch of competing cabals all jockeying for power, and everything is kind of just a show. I think that's something that even, a handful of years ago, it was less obvious to people than it is now. So I think people are like, oh, was this a 4D chess move? Was it done intentionally? Or is this just a bunch of stupid people who are making it up as they go along? And I think it's both. Yeah. I think there are some people who are 4D chessing it, and there are some people who are stupid and just making it up as they go along. But either way, things are moving faster and faster, and there's all sorts of revelations being made. I think there's probably more coming. I have a conversation here at the top of the hour with Meta Prime and a couple other guys talking about dark technology. How we're going to get some disclosures of dark tech, which I think it absolutely exists and has existed for a long time, and it's just a matter of time before, as the world becomes more and more completely interconnected, these sorts of things are just naturally going to be revealed, because they can't be hidden any longer.
Right. It's almost like, as I start to think of what we've witnessed, what we've been through, and then what could come, it almost feels like in a few years we're going to be looking back and going, remember when it seemed like an age of revelation when Biden looked like a goofball in the debate? And it's like we've come so far so quickly past anything that we're talking about in this moment right now, that this live stream in 2020, I don't know, 7 might look like so antiquated that it looks like something from the 50s, if you know what I'm saying. And some of the stuff that you talk about, I talk about, Jay, people might go, geez, they had a little bit of an inkling of something that was going to happen. But even in the moment, it feels prescient, let's say. But I think when we get to that moment, some of the stuff we're discussing now will seem like almost useless. Like we still missed certain aspects that we couldn't even have imagined were going to happen. Do you think about that sometime?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even when I started doing the whole the PayPal mafia dive after Jason put it on my radar, that was, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, and there was nobody who was talking about it. It wasn't like this was a commonly observed or accepted thing. But now it's almost become a little passé. Now people have moved on to the new thing. It was. And I don't think I was the one who put this on the radar of everyone. I just think that I started looking at it, and it just happened to be something that was happening. And then it turns out that it's much more than just the PayPal mafia. There's the Silicon Valley, the people that Balaji Srinivasan calls gray America, which I think it's kind of a telling, he has red America and blue America, and then there's gray America. And I mean, gray is never something that's associated with like vitality and life. It's kind of the opposite of that.
It's
So I think
certainly
it's a little
right.
right. I don't think it's necessarily all that complementary, but now it's becoming evident that there's stuff going on within the American investment banking sector. The Fed is operating in what could almost be construed as like a nationalistic or pro-America sort of a way. And all of the institutional power has very clearly, we were starting to get inklings of it 6 to 9 months ago, but now it's becoming very obvious that the vast majority of the institutional power is shifting to behind Trump and beginning to accept Trump. And you can look at this in two ways. You can look at it as, oh, well, this means we're going to get like diluted, watered down Trump instead of like pure distilled base Trump. But I mean, I never really expected pure distilled base Trump.
Yeah.
What happens is if they're going to have to make their deal with the devil with Trump, then that means that also we're going to get watered down, diluted, whatever it was that they were pushing for. It's a compromise that's happening, and that compromise is definitely shifting things in a new direction. It's going to have elements of the past, but we're moving in a direction of a realignment, which is what you would expect with the level of technological development that you've had the hockey stick effect on the graph of all the technological advancement in the world of bits. You would expect that after a period of time, the old systems just aren't going to be sustainable anymore because they are so klodgy and inefficient and they don't adapt well. So the things that do adapt well are naturally going to draw the attention and investment of people who have a lot invested in maintaining stability and security.
I think I'll kick this over to Prudentialist because I'd be interested to hear what he does with that. But I think the divide now is becoming clear as there's the divide between the people who want to still live in the 20th century and people who really want to live in the 21st. I'm of the 21st century mindset. I know I'll get to heaven. I'll know I'm in heaven when I look around and no one's talking or referencing World War II anymore. That'll be wonderful. My God, so good. I pray for it all the time because I'm so sick and tired of it. I'm so sick and tired of the same stupid things. I was just thinking this the other day. When I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, the dumb people were the people saying racist stuff. And now the dumb people are people who are accusing people of being racist all the time. Like, because they're still living in this 20th century. They've remodeled the civil rights movement because it's the dying boomers, and this is the last time they felt vital and new and fresh and had power and wonderment. And so they try to reproduce the civil rights movement in the 21st century, and it doesn't work anymore. We're not the same people. Sorry. So that's all right. I can look at your face all the time, man. It's all right. But I think that's the new calling card of the new regime or whatever it's going to be. Whatever it's going to be, is that people want to live in the 21st century, or people should want to live in the 21st century, and that'll be interesting and wonderful and new. Brute, you're muted, man.
Yep, thanks. I think that's a very good point. Is that you have this 20th century dynamic versus those who want to live in the 21st, and that we're still living off ideologies or political economies that are designed for the 18th and 19th centuries that have long lived past their lifetimes in the 20th and are now trying to drag this corpse, very much like Joe Biden, across the finish line into the 21st. And that is still there. I mean, I think that for as much as a lot of conservative ink people dismiss postmodernism, and with some good reason, I think that, the specter haunting the West isn't the specter of communism or Marx, as, say, Derrida and others would say. Really, it is the specter of these boomer, mythologies dominate us. These mythologies are the ghosts that haunt the West. I mean, like you said, the moment that no one references World War II or the Austrian painter or whatever, thank God,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Lord, I pray for it every day that the myth of World War II dies, and
yes.
bury that ghost. In the same way that our mythologies about peaceful protests in the civil rights movement. That goes away.
Yes.
Because we're trying to replicate it time and time again with each new psyop and movement and color revolution across the world. It's not as effective in a control society.
An exchange of free ideas.
The marketplace of ideas. Like, I mean,
some of the boomer freedom talking points are just, it drives me
pretty sure.
But
I'm pretty sure Malcolm X would have been.
As we increasingly find ourselves fractured, kind of connected in this global village where we all hate each other, as McLuhan was very right about that. Familiarity breeds contempt. So you want to break away. That's something that I do agree with Nick Land on, that like the oldest sort of like Western impulse is to seek exit, i.e., I can't exist with you. I have to find another way to where I can still exist and survive. That's a survival mechanism. That's what discrimination is. It's intelligence applied to your survival instincts. And so I think that whatever framework is going to be built for the future, it has to have those 3 R's that you mentioned, Jason, about, religions and rulers and such. But it also has to provide a alternative political formula that is not based in mythologies of the 20th century. That's the one thing that Rothbard was absolutely right about. The 20th century has to be repealed, but not just repealed in policy, but repealed mimetically. If you can repeal that from whatever thing that you're going to sell me, you're moving forward in a way that is way more successful for the future, because I don't have the baggage of World War II. I don't have the baggage of civil rights and MLK and Obama. Fantastic. Now I can focus on the things that matter. Like, there is going to be a great coming crisis when, like you mentioned, with fertilizers and phosphates. It's going to be a huge issue about manufacturing. If you want to defend the traditional sovereign territory of the United States and its borders, you're going to need to provide manufacturing, which means I don't need to have these boomer myths about equality and egalitarianism, because I'm actually going to need intelligent people to build. And this mythology is not going to allow that to happen. So you have to be paying attention to these crazy people outside of Silicon Valley that a lot of people, I think, dismiss out of hand. But even some of the like revitalization in, say, our forestry or our agriculture, I mean, they have a lot of lefty priors, but I think that people should be paying attention to the regenerative agriculture people, because America's wide-scale industrial system is not sustainable for the next 100 years. And there are very few people that are actually talking about long-term sustainable civilizational issues that will allow a society to function and for an empire to thrive. You need a breadbasket. You need a manageable, sizable population. And the strategy of being the least sick person in the room of sick people does not work. That's my biggest gripe with morons like Peter Zeihan. I read his book, The End of the World is Just Beginning. He identifies all the problems, and then he's like, nope, our 20th neoliberal solutions will carry us forward. And they're not going to carry us forward. Importing a gajillion more people in here and being the least sick person in America, we already look at our country now. It's not working. And only exacerbating that problem will make it worse. So it is crazy or as heterodox in our politics as it may seem, breaking to find something that might work for the 21st century is essential. And until we kill these ghosts that are the hauntology of the West, I don't see how you do that. And I think with your whole Build a Caesar thing and what Matt Erickson's been talking about, you're beginning to see all these pieces come together. And I think that they will be revealed to us as we get closer to the election or as Trump takes office and we see his cabinet people. Because like I mentioned earlier, when we're talking about VP picks, like Doug Burgum's got software, Silicon Valley, and Microsoft connections. There's a reason why he was floated, not because he's electable or he's the governor of North Dakota. It's because he's got connections that are going to be vital for whatever infrastructure he puts in place. I think he won't be vice president, but I think that his name got floated for a reason.
Yes. And I think some of us that talk about these things or listen to shows about these things get kind of excited that here's a window, an opening, like this could be a little bit of a step forward in the things we've been discussing, Matt's PayPal Mafia and all of these. And so you hear Tim Scott, and it's like, no. And then on one hand,
That's
I'm like,
the old world.
But that seems like it's kind of like
the best part about Tim Scott was Donald Trump basically outing him as gay on the stage. I couldn't believe he never thought it would happen. He got married. Way to go. And it's just like, thank you, Trump, for doing that. We appreciate it.
And Tim Scott's response is like, thank you, sir. May I please have another?
Took it right on the chin.
Yeah. Well, Ted Cruz kind of fell for the same kind of abuse.
He's in the pee pool suddenly.
Yeah, exactly. It's just some of these. We get excited about these ideas, and like I said, there's a window, there's an opening. Like Trump could pick Vance, etc., and we're kind of headed in this direction we've been talking about, or he picks, I don't know, Tim Scott, and it's like, please no. But I'm so used to being excited a little bit, and then boom, disappointed, politically speaking. Not in my life, but so I'm cautiously optimistic, I suppose. I do want to get into this before we end this. We'd be remiss not to discuss, what if, Jason, we talked about it when you and Matt were on my show. I don't see it happening. I can't imagine that they could fortify things this hardcore after what just happened last week. What if they I guess I should watch how you guys know what I'm getting at. What if Biden, quote unquote, wins?
What if Biden wins?
Yeah, when we're talking about the vengeful son, the
vengeful son's here. It's here and present. It's not going away. It's going to be here for the next 60 years, by my calculations. So that's just the spirit we live with. Just like how we lived for 60 years on a devouring mother or smothering mother, from the 60s up until just recently. Just how we lived for 60 odd years with tyrannical father, pre World War I, all leading up to the 1950s, 60s. We're in the vengeful son period, and so there will be violence. It's unavoidable at this point. Now, the tenor of the violence and the degree and the effects of it, that's all up in the air, and I can only do so much predicting and hope to be accurate. But I think Prudentialist mentioned this too, is that if Trump gets in, let's say, and he wants to do something about illegal immigrants or undocumented people, that kind of stuff, yeah, there will be violence. There'll be violence all across the West as people start to deal with this from one side or the other. It's unavoidable. If Biden wins, I guarantee you things will get very ugly very, very quickly. Unlike in 2020, when you had plausible deniability because of everything that else was going on, and with mail-in voting and all that stuff, you didn't have the effect of people going, hey, I didn't vote for this guy. Did you vote for him? I didn't vote for him. Right? Yeah. 2024, unless they pull the black swan of all black swan events, which I honestly don't think they're going to do, or if they do, they could pull down aliens, dude. And
it's
people
going to be too obvious at this point.
Yeah, it's like that. It's that black pilled meme of like the aliens come down. It's like, dude, I got a lot going on right now.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So I think they've crisised people out to this point. Like, people are dealing with so much internal crisis in their own life that an external crisis would just be like, sure, crazy, yeah, whatever. But if Biden wins, then the result and the reaction across the West, it just won't be isolated to America, will be, I have visions of Myanmar.
Peaceful, dude.
I think it blows up in ways that I pray, and I legitimately pray for this, that there are enough sane people still left in the regime that they realize this too. I'm under the strict belief that anything I think of has already been thought of in some way, shape, or form. Other people are thinking this too. It's a vibe. I'm putting a certain word in my own phrasing and terminology to it, but I think it's a universal thing that people are cottoning on to. And I'm praying that there's enough sane people still left that they go, okay, let's get Trump in, but with conditions. We still want our fingers in there, right? Or maybe they get the Yarvin deal, the golden parachute, where it's just like, all right, look, we're not going to persecute you. We're not going to. Here's your guarantees, but you need to go away. And here's the exit stage left. Bye bye, and we're going on this new thing. That's my legitimate hope. I think if they install Biden or Kamala or whoever, sorry, not install, That's disinformation. If a Democrat gets elected in November, I think things get bad, like really, really bad. So, that's my prediction. As cheery as it is.
I think it's also important to consider that, whatever is part of this current administration regime, it's not a monolith. I think that is a lot of old 20th century sort of Marxist analysis that needs to die sooner the better.
Yes.
I think that there are some factions that I know for sure are leaving tripwires, that some new administration or even if Biden's reelected, it's not going to be the same administration. Anyone who's ever studied presidential elections know that the second term has got a significant shift in personnel to get their dream policies passed. We saw this with Barack Obama. We saw this with Clinton's second term. George W. Bush, not so much, just in part because of the war and his growing unpopularity. But you have this in Barack Obama, I mean, especially. I think that people underestimate how consequential of a president he was for the 21st century about radically transforming the country. But there are tripwires that are going to be in place. So a lot of them are about supply chains, immigration, and then, of course, war. I mean, America is technically on paper is fighting 3 wars right now, technically 4, but you have an ongoing crisis in Ukraine that the United States has inevitably put itself in the strategic tripwire with this administration. Of course, NATO as well, and the Brits keep kind of egging us on in that respect. You then have, of course, what's going on in the Red Sea, Iran, and all the lovely testing of new toys and materials with the Houthis, and of course, a relationship with Israel tied into that. Taiwan, and there's so many ways in which a tripwire can be placed for someone to hit and get wounded, and then we're stuck getting our noses bloodied. I think that's an important thing to consider. I think that there's a lot of off ramps that can be offered, like Jason said. And in fact, you could probably turn some of these people. And I mean, I know that's a very Yarvin-esque way of thinking about things. And but again, you are going to need subject matter experts out there. Like, for instance, I like the gentleman who goes by Huntsman on Twitter @MapHumanIntel. He's awesome on all things logistics and all things about how can I make America a safe, secure, prosperous country, and our logistics are not being attacked by terrorists. Those are things that you're going to need. He's not the most political guy in the world. He kind of finds some of the people that I follow to be sort of like morons. And that's fair. He's the subject matter expert. He doesn't need to be political. He needs to know, how do I get shit done? And you're going to need the people to get shit done to do so, which means, the ideological purity test is not going to be passed. As much as people whine on about these things, they have to acknowledge the reality of where they are on the ground. I work in government. I already know that there are severe limitations as to what you can get accomplished by the existing infrastructure to, if you want base world, try doing 24 in a row National Environmental Policy Act environmental reviews about getting government granted funds to build buildings. Have fun with that. World's your oyster. I hate doing them. But that's just part of the way. You're going to need people who understand those regulations and those policies, because at the end of the day, America is not this lawless, Wild West anarcho-tyranny state. Actually, no, there's a lot of regulations on the books that you can turn a blind eye to, but also that you need to know how they work. So come time to get your guys in, they know where the playing field is, and they're not walking in blind, getting stabbed by some booby trap that some lefty manager left behind. Because if, say, Project 2025 happens, or Trump institutes his executive order for Schedule F employees, bam, 50,000 guys are fired the next day. Do you have 50,000 replacements? Do you? Do they know what they're doing? To me, these are the big issues that come into mind. It's just we always talk about real estate, real estate, real estate. Well, it's going to be about personnel, personnel, personnel. And that's the big question that goes forward. If Biden's reelected, yeah, there's going to be a change in that personnel, but a lot of the mission is going to be preparing whoever comes next. The Democratic field, if we're still maintaining, of course, our lovely facade of democratic elections, I mean, you've got Pritzker, you've got Newsom, you've got some people, and we'll see what the Democratic field looks like. But I mean, Newsom is kind of, I don't know how I feel about him, because he's technically facing his second recall campaign that's happening in his state. He knows that he's managing a huge financial crisis that he's desperately trying to stave off so it doesn't explode in his face. But also, he's a good-looking white guy with decent charisma and a nice-looking family. That guy's made for presidential politics. So we'll see what happens. But I think that if Trump gets in there, it's going to be about personnel, and it's going to be about navigating the tripwires that are going to be left behind. Because there are factions inside the Democratic base and inside, I mean, this is why I hate the sounds of 2015, and forgive me, but the reason why intersectionality is an important thing to talk about is like it's the greatest political formula the left has to get all of these disparate groups to come together to navigate the ongoing schizophrenic environment of our crappy economy, our ongoing ethnic issues inside of America and other parts of the West, to basically get them all to vote in the same direction. It's a great way to get power, oriented in one place. You're seeing that fracture. October 7th was part of that. I think that I called it on the Orrin McIntyre show back when we were talking about Claudine Gay, that we kind of just got anti-woke neoconservatism. Like, we got wealthy, Jewish financiers that are like, well, that doesn't look great. I don't want that. And they're kind of echoing the same talking points that the alt-right was saying in 2015. And that's how you know things are bad. But it does, for me at least, it shows you, okay, the factions, and there's a vibe shift going on. Things are changing. The question becomes, whoever succeeds this administration, Biden, whether it be Trump or some other guy, or even in the states, the governors are, the governorship and the state houses are way more important, I think, in trying to build bulwarks. That's a whole other stream discussion.
Yeah.
You need to have the guys who know. You do need bureaucrats. I hate to not to toot my own horn, but like you do need them, because entryism, like, you're not going to change the GOP overnight. We just got the great replacement as a talking point, and it took how many years? It took 8 years from Charlie Kirk getting griped by Patrick Casey to now being like, actually, the great replacement's real, and like it's an important thing to maintain a white majority. And so it took some time. Whereas with bureaucracy, you can make long-standing changes inside of America, even with the Chevron defense gone. Even with that removed, a nameless bureaucrat can still have monumentous changes in American policy that nobody knows about. And that's, of course, what every reactionary writer, from Filmer to DeMaistre to even our writers like Buchanan and so on, have all said. All that does is decentralize and make it harder to apply blame on the system, which makes it actually really resilient. But for us, we need those people to make it resilient in a way that revitalizes the country.
You guys have thoughts on what's going on in France? A few people have mentioned that.
I think the important thing for everyone to always remember about France, Canada, everywhere else that isn't the United States or China or Russia is that the most far right people in, let's say, France are essentially bleeding heart socialists. So, they're Bernie, the equivalent. So I'm all for people waking up and going, "Hey, we need France to be French again." I think that's an important thing. I think that you can't import a whole bunch of people who are non-civilizationists into your country and expect things to go well, because they're just going to tear everything down. That's just what they do. But in terms of thinking that they're crazy based on all other policies except for maybe one is foolhardy. Now, as I said before, all they have to be is good on one thing. So Le Pen and I forget the other guy's name who is coming up behind her, who I think is going to be the more successor to that. Those guys, if they can just again win on immigration, that's all they have to win on. It's the only thing they got to fix is solving for the culturally enriched
Jordan
problem.
Bardella.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Who looks like that? He looks like a French aristocrat right out of the 1950s. I love it. I've seen some black and white pictures of him with a cigarette, I think. I'm like, well, there you go. That's how do you sell Gitan ads? He's a strict Gallois out of France. But yeah, I wouldn't expect anything more out of those guys than that. It's the same thing we saw with Italy when they got her in. She's turned out to be a complete nothing burger, but these are socialists. They are to an American, they're very far left. They can just get really based on a few things, and I think that's good enough.
I think the important thing to consider, especially with European politics, is that because there's more than just two parties, that we've noticed this with the last presidential election when Macron was running for re-election, was that basically every other left of center party said screw our differences. We just got to make sure that Le Pen doesn't get in. And so, I mean, we're going to see that, I think, happen again. I pray that isn't the case. That, you know, whatever the parties' names are. I mean, whether I hope that that's the case, because I as someone who lived overseas and grew up overseas as an army brat, like I want Europe to stay Europe. I have a deep love and respect for my my heritage, my culture. I mean, my favorite saints to read about are from the Anglo-Celtic tradition. And so it's just like, I don't want those things to disappear. And I hope that they succeed. But I also know, historically speaking, every time this happens, all the lefty parties just gang up and make sure that the right never wins. But I think that things are at a tipping point where I pray that that's not the case. So that's how I feel about France and other parts of Europe with these elections.
I remember living in Paris in 2003, and Le Pen was running. I think that was the first election, or it was her father was running, and the tenor against that was huge. Like everyone was against it. And you take from 2003 to 2024 now, and the difference of the fact that they can actually win in the EU Parliament at all, and even be a major threat. And I think they are a major threat to the political foundations in France. That's huge. And that's, again, a 21-year span. So it's not like overnight, but these things are happening, and they're happening fast and furious now. I think Viktor Orban is much more of a model in Europe than people want to give him credit for. I think what's happening in Ukraine and Russia has been an absolute complete and total failure for NATO and for the West. A failure of magnitude that I think will take 100 years to actually kind of sort out. Like people's mind, it's massive. It's a failure on all levels at every single stage, and I don't think we've seen, like, Vietnam wasn't this much of a failure. Like Afghanistan and all this, failed coups and all that stuff. What's going on in the Middle East now, the repercussions. That's not even as much of a failure as what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. In terms of the weakening of that, the great lie of Western civilization, especially of NATO, and how it's actually pulling people into the sphere. I predict in very short order in my lifetime, if I get to live another 20 years, is that you will see places like Hungary, Romania, a whole bunch of these Eastern European states fall back to Russia, unless there's a massive revitalization of the West. Because basically now what's a lot of those countries where they joined NATO in the first place and where they joined the EU was a bulwark against the Soviet Russia kind of.
You mean voluntarily, Jason? Yes.
Yes, of course. Yeah,
right.
Totally voluntarily. No funny business involved.
Right.
But legitimately, yes,
a lot of people have. There's this leftist talking point. Oh, he's just going to keep going and going and going. That's not what you're referring to, obviously.
No. I'm saying no. I'm not saying that Russia's actually going to physically invade. I think those countries are going to go, we're leaving the EU, and we'll get cozy with they'll join BRICS. Once you start seeing Eastern European countries fall into BRICS and leave the EU and join BRICS, it's over. It's finished. Finale. And I said this 15 years ago when they started putting Eastern European countries in. Like, you don't understand Eastern Europeans. They're doing this because they're afraid of Russia. That's it. They don't want to work with Russia. If Russia can convince them to work with them, they will leave you in a heartbeat, because they don't want any of this. Like, Poland is the only maybe holdout who wants to be European so damn bad. Historically, have always wanted to be European. And even they're having major doubts because you're challenging their religion. And here's something to comprehend. This is how bad things are in Ukraine, okay, on a religious level. The only reason people can speak Ukrainian to this day, right, the only reason the language, any culture has survived is because of the church. Because Catherine the Great annexed Ukraine back over 250 years ago and outlawed the language, and many Ukrainian cultures was kept alive. The church went underground. It went further underground during communism, right? It spread out into little areas, and so you could only hear for a long time. You only could hear ethnic Ukrainian spoken in Winnipeg, Toronto, and Chicago. And now they had when Ukraine won their independence back in 1992, they actually had to import people from the West to teach them how to speak Ukrainian, because no one had spoken Ukrainian in like 200 goddamn years. Okay, so the attack on the church in Ukraine, the attack of the Orthodox Church in Ukraine, isn't just optics. It's not just like political mumbo jumbo. It's an attack on the soul of Ukraine.
Yes.
Like the identity of Ukrainians is being challenged. They're doing that now in Poland and a whole other places. They're hitting a wall that they do not understand in the West, and that wall is going to start pushing back. And I guarantee you, it's going to push them back into friendship with Russia. That's happening, and it's happening fast because I don't know how, even if we have some series of political miracles over the next few years, I don't see this ship course correcting really quickly. I think it's going to be a slow generational thing, and I think you're going to see a lot of those Eastern European countries get pulled into partnership with Russia in one way, shape, or another.
You're good. The segue talent that you have. I got one last question for you guys. I appreciate you guys being here, everyone in the chat being here. How has Orthodox Christianity helped you form your opinions, see the world? For Matt and Jason both, all three of us were into political analysis and paying attention to things and noticing things prior to being Orthodox. How has that changed how you view things and the way you feel about this entire milieu, let's say? Matt, you go
Sure.
Sorry, unless you want to think for a second.
No. I mean, I have lovely pewter metal plates that say I'm good at talking out of my rear, and I'm sure I can pull something out of there that's not total crap. But I think that is a good point. All of us have done political analysis beforehand. I mean, I've been involved in politics as soon as I could legally vote when I was still in high school and be involved in that way. I mean, I didn't grow up with any Christianity really outside of like the military services, which was more of a Sunday, friendship club than it was worship.
Yes.
And so I think that, I go back to all the time that the from St. Paisios, if I were to look at all the newspapers and all the news of the world and, not know that God gets the last word, I would have gone mad. And I think about that very often as I look at my timeline. I mean, I uninstall Twitter, like the actual app, off my phone on the weekends. I don't reinstall it until the agape meal after liturgy.
Nice.
And so that's my technological ascesis. It kills my Twitter engagement, but it's for my own sake.
Yes.
But I think one of the things to just look at is that, every person we see on Twitter, whether we're close to the end times or not, I mean, Christ can come back like a thief in the night. I mean, 1,000 years in the night is yesterday, is a watch in the night. I don't know when he'll come back, but we are to pay attention to the seasons as he tells us. And so, I think that for me especially, I think about just very much the keep thy mind in hell and despair not, because I don't know what this world is going to bring, but I also know that they can't kill the soul. And that helps a lot in that respect, that no matter what is to come, I have my own obligations towards myself and towards Christ that allow me to know that I don't need to have a take on everything. I like one of the things, especially since doing YouTube and especially doing and being an Orthodox Christian who I've been wrangled into parish council. I'm now treasurer because I handle money for a living. So it's like, yeah, okay, I'll take another full-time job. Why not? But I think about very often the fact that, I think about James 3 a lot in scripture is that the teachers are judged and condemned more harshly for what they say on.
Yep.
You look back towards the wisdom of Sirach and in Ecclesiastes, that, you don't have to offer an opinion on everything at all. Like, you don't have to. Everyone, this take economy is so vapid and desiring to have the most boisterous claim that you can't really back up with evidence. So it's like, well, I don't have an answer to that. And as a kid growing up, I always hated the phrase, I don't know, because that would tell me to go research and figure it out. You can't see it, but there's like 5 bookshelves right next to me full of all sorts of subjects from my youth up. And I mean, they're great stuff. I have everything from organic chemistry to American musical theater, but it's just like, okay, how much of that is actually going to be beneficial for me in the long run? Maybe some of it will, some of it won't. But I think that being able to say, I don't know, and especially I'll never truly fully know God. I could live for 1,000 years. I'm still never going to know God. And that helps immensely in humbling myself, knowing I'm one man trying to make sense of a world that does hate us. If the world loved you, it would have, he would have loved me first, as Christ tells us. So I'm reminded that in my own, in my orthodoxy and this, tradition that, while yes, foreign and as a minority where I live in the United States, you and I, Buck, kind of know this in Texas. or it is growing, but still, that it's a small, tight knit community, especially in Western and Anglosphere countries, that you're not alone, that people are looking for answers, and that they're looking for the one place that hell, can't overcome. And that is the church, that is the body of Christ that we're part of. And for me, that is a great reassurance, but also at the same time, knowing what Christ tells us about the beginning of the end, the things that we need to do to be vigilant and to prepare ourselves for. Our predictions could all be wrong. I don't know if any of us have the gift of prophecy. Who knows? But I take into deep consideration that we could be wrong, and who knows what that may come and what that may be. But we have the tools necessary to harden ourselves to endure. And I think that's the one great aspect about all of this in my political analysis or my spiritual analysis, is that in a death avoidant society, that was the silver lining of COVID, is that in a death avoidant West, being reintroduced to the fact that death is real, you will die, all of us will face the same fate at the end, that means you have to answer some really hard questions. And that does require you to have an answer that is rooted in the eternal truth, and that truth is the Logos, the incarnate Word of God. That, unfortunately, if you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to be saved, but and I know that not everyone will be. I'm not a universalist in any stretch of the imagination. And that has allowed me to be, I think, more grounded and mindful about how to approach certain issues and topics. And so it's given me a much more sober and grounded worldview, that there are things that are outside of my control that are greater than anything that we could ever think about combined.
Yes.
But on top of that, like, I have the answer, and the answer is literally right above me at my computer desk, which is the icon of Christ. Like, I know what to focus on in the end.
Yes, and I think it's no coincidence that during 2020, 2021, 22, etc., the people that were falling for the stuff, where they were spiritually, I think it's no coincidence. And that's kind of when I, excuse me, the scales came off my own eyes to an extent. And I was like, wait a second, this isn't just about science. There's something deeper here. But if you don't have anything deeper, it was just about quote unquote science, and you form your own gods. Jason, I'll let you take this.
Yeah, I mean, I've detailed this story one too many times, so I'll truncate it as best as I can.
I just wanted to get you emotional here at the end.
Oh, it's happening. Dark Enlightenment got me in the feels yesterday. He posted something to me, and it just made me like kind of almost want to cry. I'm 47 this year. I'm getting into that weepy stage. I'm not a sentimental kind of human being.
Here we are.
It's catching up on you, man. I've read about this stuff. I'm like, nah,
you guys are old.
Won't happen to me. Nah, no, I get weepy over stuff. Okay, so I was 32 years an atheist until 2020, and I had a spiritual awakening. And in that moment, I realized I was wrong about everything. Everything. Like my entire presumption of reality up until that point, or what I had formed in 32 years, was completely and totally false. And that was a very humbling and shameful moment in my life. But it was also a great uplifting. One of the keys to that was understanding that God's love includes suffering. That these two things are intermingled, and that what we would experience as a suffering here and now in this moment or in this life can oftentimes lead to great things down the road in ways that we cannot calculate nor imagine or fathom.
I'll say,
early Christians are sacrificed, fed to lions. It brings down the Roman Empire and converts the empire into Christianity, and we have Christianity in the West, and Western civilization is born. You can't tell the Christian being fed to the lion in that moment that's what's going to happen, but yet that's what's going to happen. We're given these stories and these 1,000 mile views on these things to give us that, to keep reminding us that it's not about you. But you are part of it. You're an important part of it. But you got to check your pride, check your vainglory, re-examine why you're doing this and for whom. Prue, you said this kind of so one of the things I echo quite often in the show is that you're not alone. You know, if we're all crazy, well, we're all crazy. Then hey, be crazy with us. Like it's fun to be crazy sometimes, isn't it? Because the alternative. Well, we're seeing this with pride parades, and I won't bring up the pool again. But you know, like I'd rather be crazy than live in a world with that as a normal constant. You know, so yeah. One of the things that I guess to ultimately answer your question here is that orthodoxy gives me context, and a context that's bigger than myself, that humbles me and keeps me doing the work. Because you know, sometimes you look at it and go, oh, those numbers aren't big enough. It's like, shut up. What are you building something? Are you saying things that are true? Are you trying to be true? Are you trying to partner yourself with one true God, with the highest of the high? Are you doing the good work? Yes, then don't worry about the rest of it. Like the other stuff will take care of it itself, or God will take care of it for you. Like, don't sweat it. So that's been a big it makes the cross lighter. And I think that's sorry, one last finishing. I said this with Matt on the show once, and I keep returning to it in my mind, is that the atheist puts the whole world upon their shoulders. He puts all of existence on their shoulders, puts all morality, everything's on them all the time, because they've decided that they are the arbiter of reality. Even if there's a consensus reality, they still have to bear it. The one thing that religion gives you is, and that cross is crushing. That's nihilism. That's what leads you down. That squashes you out. The one thing that religion, and specifically orthodoxy in my case, or in our case, gives you is that you become aware of the cross, but the cross becomes lighter because Christ is helping you bear it. And you realize that your cross is nothing compared to his. In the great context of all crosses, yours is a small, tiny little splinter of wood, and you're just carrying it around like it's a boulder and bitching about it. Like, just you know, man up, shoulder up, you know, keep going.
Yes, that's that meme of the guy sitting there like, why must you give me all your toughest, the worst trials? And he's like, I didn't. I gave you my lightest ones. It's a sort of thing. Sorry to interrupt you, Jason.
No, that's it. That's all I got.
Yes, all right.
I'll just keep. Blah, blah, blah,
Yeah. Matt, the Prudentialist, Jason from 2-Bit Podcast. Thank you guys for doing this live stream. Thank you guys for watching it. I rarely do these, but this was pretty fun. So I might try to.
You should do more.
I should do more.
You should.
You know, I did it without the my script and all these things. I'm joking.
Side quest: when you have a toddler, when you have a little girl as a daughter, you get butterfly stickers on everything. I'm in a sea of butterfly stickers.
That's sweet.
It's nice.
It's a good way to. It's the nice white pill to end the show on.
It is. Yes. Matt, you got any white pills?
Or well, God wins in the end. You know, that's the eternal white pill. We've already won.
Yeah.
So
ironically, Murray Rothbard used to say, and we all know his early life history, and he was secular to say the least. But I'm pessimistic short term, and I'm optimistic long term. And now seeing that through the Orthodox lens, it's like, well, yeah, so am I.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, as for a white pill, I mean, you know, that's as good as it gets in that respect. But I think that the white pill is that as things get crazy, there are going to be a lot of opportunities to ride that wave in a way that is profitable both spiritually and for your family or your own needs. I mean, there are a lot. Strap in, you know, like the rides, like we're just climbing up the top of the roller coaster. Like there's a lot of fun to have as we go down, whether it's in a transition with a new administration or some black swan event happens. Like I think that you should look at this with like, give me more of your harder and stronger battles, you know?
Yeah.
It's the way to look at it with some wide-eyed, bring it, you know?
This is, I'm not going to get into this because I can't, but there was another, let's say, attack from the outside. And I don't mean necessarily spiritually, but like someone coming at, let's say, someone out there, I know this is hard to believe, wants me unemployed. And I got to witness this attempt this last week. And it reminded me because Jason said, oh, the Orthodox, we're going to be in the crosshairs as things move rightward, which we assume they're going to in this timeline we're on. Do you think about that, Matt?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, it's already, we're a religious minority in the United States, and I don't mean that in the whole "woe is me" context, but I mean between the history of the church in America with respect to the Cold War. I mean, you go to a lot of parishes in New England, East Coast. There's still American flags inside of a lot of churches. Just to reiterate, listen,
And
we're
Orthodox,
we're not Russians, And so I think
No.
that with the whole Russian disinfo, the war there, that will be a renewed focus, and especially because as Orthodoxy grows in the South, and there's already a lot of Russian influence and peddling inside of the South and using the church to do so. I mean, I think that that's an easy avenue for the state to target the faith. And with, from a national security standpoint, I don't blame them, but I also know that that's going to come with a lot of persecution and a lot of scrutiny. And I mean, people on Twitter have already asked me, like, well, how do you view your relationship to Patriarch Kirill and the war? And it's just like, well, I don't read what he says on the war because I have to listen to my own priest and my own bishop and my own issues, and I have to focus on myself. I don't have time to read, his eminence's views on his nation and the conflict. It's not. It's a tragedy to witness the absolute destruction of primarily non, Gentile Orthodox Christians in that region of the world killing each other, and for what purpose remains yet to fully be revealed to us. But I think that, that persecution is bound to come. And I think that if you have any copy, whether it's a bootleg or an original print of, Seraphim Rose's, Russian catacomb saints, the martyrs in Russia today, tomorrow in America. Like I do see that as an inevitability. And I've said it once or twice. I've been with, there are a lot of people my age, so late 20s in my parish, and it's outside in their yard, their kids were playing. And I had said this absentmindedly, and I think that it was very true. The more I look back on it, I said, these will be the memories I look back on when things get really bad. And I don't know what that will be for the faithful and for the church, but there's a reason why, there's a reason why we cling to those things, because we know the history of our faith and we know that what comes next.
Yeah, my prediction about the Orthodox coming under attack will be, if you ever you want to make quick enemies, be the honest person around a bunch of liars.
Yeah.
Be the good person in a group of not so good people. Just be principled and have them see your principles. People will hate you for it very quickly. And especially now, we live in an inverted world. This has always been true, but I think even more so. And so I've made this prediction about Jason's apple pie prediction. Maybe Purge, you've seen it. I've had basically been retweeting it like crazy, because every time something happens, I'm like, what I think is happening is that the woke is going to be transformed into what I'm calling the neo-trads, which will be some sort of return to, the liberals want to return to 1995. The conservatives want to return to 1955. I think they're going to meet in the middle and create this new neo-trad thing. Very sundresses and apple pies. I'm seeing like fat pants all over the place right now. Very 95 vibes. What's part of that transition, or what's going to happen with that, is that they're going to glom onto, and this is borrowing from Father Seraphim Rose's ideas, is that you're going to get this mush Christianity, because people really want redemption, but redemption requires sacrifice. So they're not going to. A lot of people aren't going to go that extra mile to get redemption. What they'll settle for is forgiveness. And what a lot of mush Christian churches will do is give you forgiveness easy, right? This is where they think the baptism, you get baptized, you're saved, hey, you're good. Hulk Hogan, for example. So
yes,
that mush Christianity will become the enemy of Orthodox Christians. Not because we're doing anything other than being Orthodox Christians, but because they're going to hate us. Oh, but we will be, now that we will be in this Girardian idea, we will become rivals, because we're both desiring the same thing, just in different ways, or we're models for that desire. And the mush Christians will be a much bigger group of people, and all across all levels of stratosphere power. Russell Brand, You're seeing, again, my feed is full of, I just saw this Masonic Jewish wife of someone just got baptized, right? Like baptism is a big thing. It's the new thing now, right? And you're going to see a lot of that. And the more you hold to certain principles and don't get sucked into it, the more they're going to dislike you, and the more. So I think we're going to have this really weird window. I would say about somewhere in between 5 years, maybe even 10, but certainly about 5, where all of us in this conversation and a lot of us in our groups will have a lot of opportunities to become mainstream, or mainstream, or get a much bigger audience and all that stuff that comes with it, if that's what you want. There will be that opportunity. Within a few years after that, it's going to start closing ranks real fast. And anyone who has any principles are going to be starting to be excluded really quickly, because they don't want us there. They don't want anyone who actually has read, who's read the Saints and knows a few things and understands about the passions or energies and essences or the Trinity, all that really good stuff, all the real stuff that's intrinsic to understanding what redemption, sacrifice, suffering, all those things are. They don't want any of that. They're going to want the easily marketable thing, the thing that you can sell Instagram stories on. So, bitter white pill, there'll be an opportunity, there'll be a window, and you can go through that window or succeed in what ways you can. But understand this is that window will be closed real fast once they get a certain amount of people on board. And once that, I'm calling it mush Christianity, maybe there'll be a different term for it, but that religion of the future thing.
Yeah.
Right. Once they start baptizing Hindus, then you'll know.
Narrow is the gate, but I think that you're right. You're already seeing that, and I think Tucker Carlson's kind of also spearheading that, where he'll reference scripture. He'll say he's Episcopalian, that he believes, but also that the things that we consider, for instance, like Saint Simeon, the New Theologian, tells you about, like, how maybe don't look so deep into the night sky when you pray at night, because you're going to start seeing things that aren't really there, or make something out of it that aren't there. And you see this, of course, where people trying to make sense of what the government's saying. They psyoped aliens, right? And everyone's just like, well, I got a lot going on, like the meme is, but also, like, it couldn't have been more fake with what Mexico was talking about. And it's just like, well, why now? Why now, when on Twitter there's a very popular Twitter account that tells you that, like, Donald Trump's the Antichrist, or that there are numerous people that are saying, well, we need spirituality, like, I'm God-pilled. And it's just like, well, what does God mean to you? Is it like the triune Godhead, one power, one Godhead, one essence? If not, then, like, we're not on the same page.
Right.
And I think that that Jason's really right on this, is that, like, you're seeing this sort of, like, barstool conservatism meets, like, a girl in a sundress with a cross around her neck, wherein it doesn't mean anything, but it will coalesce into some kind of loosely organized political social movement of, well, I want to love Jesus, but I'm also going to pay for her OnlyFans. And again, we talk about madness. I mean, St. Anthony the Great made that very clear, that there will come a time where people go mad, and they're going to point to us and tell us that we're not them. And I think that we're going to see that very soon. If Trump gets in, I think the cultural pendulum may move slightly in the direction, but it's going to be that mushy, moral therapeutic deism. I want to have, God wants me to have good things, so I'm going to go get the slutty girl or whatever. And it's just like, we know that that's not the way, and we know that narrow is the gate. Many are called, few are chosen. The point for us is now to stay on that royal path, and that's going to be the big challenge, as things get weird, mushy, and schizophrenic.
And you want to know why this is going to happen? You know why this is all happening? Because they're all modeling Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, sensible gay man, VC, very, very successful, all roads lead back to Peter Thiel, right? So Dave Rubin is going to be a poster child, right? Sensible gay man, 90s, very 90s gay, right? Sweater vests, married.
Very, very Will and Grace. Yeah.
Buying children. The gay pride parade stuff, that's all going to go away. There'll still be parades, but very somber kind of affairs, and like one day, and it'll just like that, that's going to happen. And I believe that's happening because all the people who actually have their the real new forming elites are, every single one of them to a person is modeling Peter Thiel, to the point where when Peter Thiel changes his haircut, they change their haircut. when he shows up on an interview wearing a certain kind of style or with a tie, without a tie, they start doing it. It's across the entire VC field. So Elon Musk is the public guy who all the kids want to be like, right? Peter Thiel is the guy behind the scenes or who all the elites want to be like. So,
and it's easy now for those people that are headed that direction that might be, let's say, left of center, doing the woke stuff and the blue hair, when they point to us and go, they're judging me. And it's like, well, no, but I see why you would think that. Then when the mushy Christians right of center go, they're judging me, pointing to us, that's going to be a more interesting discussion, I feel, and I think it's possible that's coming. All right, boys, let's end on that. Jason, thank you so much. Matt, thank you so much. YouTube chat, thank you guys. I rarely do these. I'm going to do them more often. I appreciate you all, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Tuesday, I have an episode coming out with Mano Elia from the SOS podcast and Study of Stuff. It's we get into some dark spiritual stuff, the New Age, Hermeticism, how that's seen through the Orthodox lens. It's really good. Thank you guys so much. And Matt and Jason, stick around for a sec.
Thanks.